Welcome to Chakras and Cusswords, a podcast that dives into self-improvement, completing goals, and overcoming modern-day obstacles. I am your host, Catherine, and together we will address our fears, establish self-awareness, and complete self-growth through honesty and reflection. Remember to please like and share this podcast. Thank you. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Chakras and Cusswords. And today we are talking about manifesting and also manifesting and releasing and clearing your trauma. I'm super excited about this episode because I feel that trauma is something that affects so many of us. It's really almost like a block when we are dealing with our mindset and creating a pathway to success in manifestation. And today I have a special guest, a transformational coach who is achieving great things with high achieving empathy work, and also just really showing people ways to break through their trauma. And today it is Miss Marina on stage. Or please introduce yourself, because I'm so bad at introducing people. And welcome to the podcast.
No worries. Hi, it's great to be here. My name is Marina. I am a somatic transformational coach, and I work with people on trauma. And you're absolutely right. So many of us are dealing with this. And I'm so fascinated about the meeting point between the self-development world and the trauma world, because I myself tried manifesting for so many years and feeling so very stuck. And I see that in a lot of my clients that essentially just like want to accomplish different things in their life. They're excited, they have all these goals, but then they just feel incredibly stuck and nothing is moving forward. And I find that the key is working through trauma in the body. So that's why I said I'm a somatic coach. Somatic is of the body.
Okay, great. I like that you kind of gave us the definition of somatic is within the body. That means it's within the person who's trying to manifest, right?
Yes.
Okay. So when you meet your clients and well, first of all, how did you get, okay, because so many of us jump onto well, how are you helping people? But in all honesty, many of us have kind of like a story behind our journey. So how did this all started? How did you get in this profession where you started helping people releasing their traumas?
So I actually was a group facilitator for 10 years, and I worked with teenagers, Israeli and Palestinian teenagers, around the conflict in the region, in conflict transformation. And that work was actually very similar to coaching in a lot of ways, but I had no idea, didn't know what coaching was. And of course, there was so much trauma that would come up in those situations. And so that kind of gave me that professional background. I got certified as a facilitator. It was a very intensive certification where I actually got to sit with other people. I'm Israeli, so I got to sit with other Israelis and other Palestinians and do the dialogue process myself. So very, very intense. And I've had a lot of my own stories of trauma that I have tried to work through the mind in so many ways, like doing mindset, doing affirmations, clearing limiting beliefs. I just remember like Googling all the stuff like nonstop.
Right?
Yeah, because I knew that I had a bigger purpose in the world. And I actually started a health coaching business. And a lot of things in my life were very, very stuck all the time. And I just didn't understand why. And I didn't understand why I knew all the marketing, all the strategies, like everything I needed. But my business was not at the point where I wanted it to be. And it also didn't feel good. Like I was constantly feeling not present within my business, feeling disappointed. everything would kind of throw me off, where I would have to like take 3 days off and just lay in bed because I was upset that one person said no. And no matter how much I tried to think my way through, well, it's not a big deal if someone says no, just keep going. It's fine. Like, it's a journey, you're learning. My body was not on board. It just really wasn't. And I went to therapy, all kinds of different therapy. And then one day I just had, well, first of all, I had a coach that told me, just sit with yourself and just feel your body and don't think about it, don't judge it. And she was actually a somatic therapist turned coach.
Okay.
And so, of course, she said that. And so I did that. I did that for many, many days. And it turned into like hours where I would just like sit with my body and feel what's going on in my body. And it was really fascinating. And then I had this intuition that, oh my gosh, I really want a therapist that works in the body. Like, I've talked and I'm so over talking. I just like can't talk anymore, you know?
You're like, my throat chakra's on overload.
Exactly. And how much can you really talk about things that have happened to you,
Right.
and, you know, transform them? And I had no idea this actually existed. I was like, this is what I want. Hopefully there is such a thing. And so I went from referral to referral, eventually ending up in somatic experiencing. And because a therapist referred me to my current therapist, and she was like, oh, so you're looking for somatic experiencing. And I was like, what? What now?
Right.
And that's how I ended up there. And I had no idea that that was a thing, but my eyes were freaking wide open. And I just completely broke free after many months. Like, it wasn't in one session, it wasn't in 2 sessions. And I still continue to do the work every single day, not just with my therapist, but now I also do it on my own. And then I started putting it into practice. And it was actually, somatic work was part of my coaching certification, but then I also learned so much from my therapist as well. And this month I'm going to be doing a 3-month specifically somatic certification. So I'm like so excited for that. And
Oh,
it's just,
wow.
it's miraculous. Like, it has just done wonders for my life, for my business, for my stuckness, everything. So I know that was long, but that is
No,
my
no,
story.
no. That's great. So what does somatic look? Doesn't look like the talking, like, because I think when people think of coaching, or um they think of like even therapy is like you're on the couch, the
Yeah.
coach is in front of you, and you're telling them all your problems or all your obstacles of how come you can't create goals, or how come your intentions aren't fully getting met. And you're sitting there and you're like, I mean, I've been in therapy because I've had a lot of trauma in my life, from, I would say, from birth. I've had a lot of trauma from my
Mm.
life. So I have been in therapy consistently, especially in my teen years, and then of course a little bit later in my adulthood. And I will admit, I don't see a therapist consistently all the time, but I get intuitions, and I get when I start to get at that point where I need to go back into therapy, I automatically know, and that is something that I don't hesitate on doing. But I think that some people think it's just almost like this depressing thing that we're just sitting on the couch and like somebody's, going through all our problems. And probably traditionally, a lot of us, that's what we're learned to think, that therapy and coaching kind of, well, therapy is different than coaching, but what kind of therapy looks like. So, what does somatic based coaching and therapy look like?
Yeah. Well, first, I think it's really cool that you follow your intuition around that. That's really awesome. So yeah, it's super different. And we, of course, we talk, we still like converse about things. And somatic therapy and somatic coaching are different, yes, because therapy is not goal oriented, like you can just go and go, or just like you're doing, like you can randomly go, but there's no specific goal. Whereas coaching, you have a goal. Maybe you're stuck with the goal, or maybe you just like want to work on something, and you give it a period of time to work on that. So I think that's the major difference. So what does it look like? So when you think of like a goal that you have, you can think of it in your mind, right? Like, this is what I want, and I want to create this. And maybe, like, for example, part of it, this can be like the whole goal, or a part of it in order to achieve the goal is to become confident. And you can think in your head, like, yes, I should be confident because I'm a great person. And you can look in the mirror and tell yourself, like, I'm such a beautiful person, and I have overcome things, and I have achieved so much, and all these good qualities, etc., etc. However, your body may not be on board. Your body may just be like, nope, like, I'm not with you here, girl or guy. And so, like, the somatic part is the embodiment part. It's actually not just thinking about it, but embodying it with your whole entire body. And the reason that this is important, I know I'm like giving a background rather than answering a question, but I promise I'm going to get there. The reason that this is important is that trauma does not only happen in the mind. Trauma happens to our whole body. And there's a really amazing breakthrough book and work by Bessel van der Kolk called The Body Keeps the Score. And so our body, like, trauma is imprinted in our cells, in our body. And that's why, like, sometimes, like, for example, if you smell a certain smell, all of a sudden you can have an entire, like, full body experience of being in a whole different time and experience in your life. And that's basically it's because kind of like a positive trauma. But if you've experienced trauma, and by the way, I believe every single one of us has. Sometimes we think that it's these big major things, but it can be all kinds of experiences that were simply too much for us to handle in the moment. That's like the simplest definition of trauma: too much, too fast, too soon. And so, like, you don't have the internal resources to handle that situation. That's when trauma is created, and that stores in our bodies, not just our minds. And so then we can get triggered and we can react, and our reaction is like a response to something in the past. It's not a response to the present moment. It's our whole body all of a sudden believing, like, oh my gosh, like, this is just like XYZ. And this is not conscious, right? Like, triggers are not conscious. If they were, we would be like, oh, but this is a different situation, so I don't need to actually behave like I am. So what we do in somatic coaching, of course, we talk about things, and we uncover, like, the source of different things and where they come from. But a lot of times people don't know, like, they just don't know. They just feel stuck and they're not sure why. So what we do is we work with the felt sense. We work with actual sensations in our body, and we regulate the nervous system so that we have more capacity to deal with difficult constriction and pain and emotion in our body, and that our body doesn't think like, oh my God, danger, because that's trauma, right? It's like, oh my God, I'm scared, I'm gonna die. Like, I just feel like I'm gonna die. I literally worked on this yesterday with my therapist around abandonment. What happens when I feel like someone's gonna abandon me? I'm gonna die. Like, that's, immediate. My mind believes I'm gonna die, and I can tell my mind all day long, like, no, you're not. But my body's like, no, but you are. Like, you're dying. And so we work, basically the way that I do it, I'm sure everybody does it differently, is I have people close their eyes and tap into their body and start with a very safe space. So, like, imagining something safe and comforting and comfortable, and really feeling their sensations around it, because a lot of times people who have had a lot of trauma, especially, they're very disconnected. So it's even hard for them to like notice sensation, like to notice friction, openness, cold, warm, heavy, light, like in their body. So it depends on the person. Like sometimes I'll go super slow, and some people, like yesterday, I had a one-off session with a woman that just like went all in, and I could see that she was present. She wasn't checking out. So I was like, this is amazing. So we just went for it. And then my favorite practice is called pendulation, which is where you go between the difficult sensation and then the sensation of comfort, openness, ease, either in your body or like having an image that's called a resource that you tune into, and then you feel that sensation. And as we go back and forth very gently, the constriction starts to kind of unload and disappear. And so not only are we working with like a specific memory or a topic, that practice in itself regulates the nervous system. So you're learning, traumatized people don't go from constriction to openness very fast. It takes us a lot of time. And that's what we're teaching the nervous system, like how to go from to, oh, I'm good, like how to pendulate back and forth quicker. And so we're teaching our nervous system to do that. And we're teaching our nervous system to be safe with uncomfortable sensations and emotions.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's cool. That definitely makes a lot of sense because it's more like within. So how does one person get into the steps of clearing their trauma, or like what is usually a road for success with this?
So, first of all, if you feel super stuck, like you're noticing that you're super stuck and you've tried a lot of things, like you've tried everything.
You
You're
tried
like,
everything. You're like, why can't I get out of this?
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Usually, this is around unconscious and subconscious things, and that is where trauma comes in. So, in that situation, I really, really recommend working with a practitioner. Even though I feel very skilled now in this, I still work with a practitioner personally because it can be tricky to be in your body and observe your body at the same time. And somatic practitioners, and this is something that I keep learning all the time and improving, we notice like very little things. For example, when people yawn, that is nervous system shutdown. So when that starts to happen with my clients and they're yawning, of course, it doesn't mean they're bored. It means that their nervous system, it's like too much to handle. So they're almost like falling asleep. So I will immediately be like, okay, feel your feet on the ground. How does it feel? And just switch, the conversation. So it's really important to
So
have someone.
it's not because they're tired or anything.
I mean, it could be, but
Okay.
it could be, yes. But
Okay.
there's also a big part of it is our nervous system is tired. Our nervous system's capacity, it's like too much,
Yeah.
and that's kind of, this is where we don't want to re-traumatize people. So we don't want to repeat the effect of the trauma, because this is exactly what trauma is, too much. So in that moment, we go into something soothing, and then we come back. It's not that we leave the topic, but we come back and we expand that capacity to be with those things. But my process in general, I do a lot of inner child work. I really love inner child work, but I really include like the body with it. So a lot of my work with people is with their eyes closed. They'll spend a lot of time there, and so the awareness is huge. So like, okay, I'm stuck. I've tried everything. I don't know. And then we kind of like uncover maybe what it could be and what the pattern is. Like I almost like to create maps. I just like love being almost like detective, like, okay, so tell me how this happens, how this pattern plays out, and where. is it in your, it's usually in more than one place, right? It's like romantic relationships, career, like all these different things. Okay. And tell me about it. Like, how does it unfold? Who affects it? Who, who are the key players? And okay. And does this remind you of something from your childhood?
Mm-hmm.
Of course it does, right? So then, okay, so it reminds them of something. And then really, really huge after awareness is a lot of self-compassion.
Yeah, I think I agree with you 100%. Like inner child, so many of us, I mean, yes, we definitely pick up situations as adults too, but the inner child is so big. Like it really sets so many structures on how we manifest our mindset, or how we even like view life, how we've been, taught to see the world, in all honesty, and how we've been taught to see ourselves and others. So I really like that you brought that up, because that's a great topic. When you start to take people through this journey and people say like, I'm stuck, I fucking tried everything, like I don't know why I can't get my business right, I don't know why I can't get my marriage right, I don't know why these damn kids don't listen to me, like I just do not know what is going on here, I need some goddamn help me. What are the most things that people are having issues with? Like, what are the biggest subjects that you see where people are like, I'm just manifesting everything wrong, or everything that I'm manifesting is negative, or everything I'm manifesting is just wrong, wrong, wrong? What are usually that you see that people have a hard time with?
I would say it's career, just being
Mhm.
either overworking, just like crazy amount of hours, and also not
Mhm.
enjoying what they're doing at all, but feeling trapped in that. Like there's no other option. Or the other one is relationships. So either not being, a lot of people actually come to me after breakups,
Mhm.
but then not being able to understand the breakup, or like what happened, how did I create this, how did I end up here? And it's a usually, breakups are a big wake up call for them. And then creating a new relationship that they really love, like how to do that, like how to go about that, how to talk to people, um and yeah, and connect with people, and sometimes even friendships, like how to create meaningful connection.
Okay. Yeah, with friends. That's an interesting one, because I feel like friendships can be difficult too, because it's almost like there's some, boundaries, almost resembles like a relationship, like a love relationship, and then there's also areas where it's sad when, friends break up. Like
Totally.
I've seen
Yes.
I've seen like people say, sometimes friend breakups are worse than love relationship breakups, depending on what the situation is and, what happened. But that's an interesting one. So how do you lead people into the area of creating this clearance of trauma? Do they have to do like a lot of self-awareness, and do they have to start to dig back deep into their trauma? Because like I told you that I have a lot of trauma
Mm-hmm.
in my life, and in all honesty, what has worked for me, I've had times as a young teenage girl where I did do the digging up when experience was real and the experience was current. But at the time, I felt like I closed it. I then closed that chapter. If I start to get like dreams, or if I start to get areas where I feel like it's hindering me again, then I would go back into therapy. But for life coaching, and coaching, they don't necessarily start to dig up that trauma. So how do you release it when you're in that aspect of work? I guess would be my question.
So everything is really in service of their goal. And so like the first session, we always go through, all the areas of their life and what their goals are there and what's the most important. And then we pick one that's kind of going to lead us through our time together. Usually I work with people for 3 months, but very often people extend, and then we'll choose another goal. But it's a 3-month period. And then everything is basically around this goal, right? So let's say they want to create better romantic connections and relationships. Then we start to dig, well, why haven't you so far? What has been keeping you back so far? And the cool thing about somatic work in the body is that you don't necessarily have to bring up the stories of trauma. You can just feel it in your body. So oftentimes I'll tell my clients, we don't even have to go into the story that comes up for you, but just feel it in your body. Feel that constriction that you have when you think of a possibility of romance with someone, and just ride that back to childhood and just check in with, where did it show up for you as a child? It can also be talking about their parents' relationship and how that was their relationship with their parents. It can also be generational stuff, like their grandparents and great grandparents, and even their birth stories, and what happened there, and attunement of the people that raised them. Like attunement is like, so when we're crying as a baby, our parents kind of mirror back to us what crying is, what joy is, all these things. And if our parents are not emotionally available to themselves, they're shutting out their own emotions, they're going to have a really hard time mirroring back. And so that misattunement really, really can affect us as adults. So it can even be right there. So we dig into all this good stuff. And I think my clients are pretty prepared for it, because on Instagram, that's usually how people find me. I post about trauma pretty much every day. So they come knowing that we're going to dig shit up. Like it's
Right.
yesterday it was so funny. My client and I were literally laughing because I was like, okay, well, do you want to close your eyes and feel this? I know you don't. And then, we were just like both laughing. I like to keep it funny sometimes because, because it can, of course, it's not easy work always, but it's very powerful, and it's life-changing.
I I like how you said you like to keep it funny, because just the other day at work, it was like, I mean, and it's not to be insensitive or anything like that, but just the other day, it was like a fucking shit show. And I'm like, it's just, it feels like it's not going to get better. It just feels horrible. Um, I'm sure like so many of us have all this emotional baggage behind it, and we have all this just, there's so many people who just have so much emotional baggage. And then somebody said like, it's just another day in paradise. And it's like, yeah, it is. It's just another day in paradise. Like this, this is just almost so bad that it's funny. Like you just you can't even focus on the bad anymore, and you just have to focus on like those little funny moments, like where it's just humor, or a patient does something funny, like, I mean, some of the patients are, even in really bad situations, are hilarious. And it's like they try to encourage, like they might know that like our spirits are, kind of going through it. But I've had patients just be absolutely so funny and cute during
I
like some
love
of
it.
the worst times. And it's like finding that little piece of humor really gets you through so much. And
Yeah, it's
it
a
does.
resource.
Yes.
Humor really is like like how I mentioned resourcing before, I think it can really be a resource for us.
Yeah, and I think also when you are clearing trauma, to find the area that, I mean, of course, there's some things that aren't necessarily funny, or there's some things that aren't necessarily, but the thing is, so many of us have so much trauma that if you can find an area that just kind of brightens up talking about it and making it a little bit less so heavy, because trauma feels very heavy,
Yeah. Yeah.
and to kind of have that with your coach or your client, it really, really definitely helps a lot.
Yeah. And, I also really prioritize not overwhelming, like
Mm-hmm.
supporting my clients and not overwhelming themselves. They're so used to doing that
Mm-hmm.
with, overworking and overdoing and all these things, so that we can actually have it be a pleasant process. It is intense, it is hard, but it doesn't have to crush you. So that's,
Right.
yeah, that's really, really important for me. And it's like part of my coaching agreement. Like, one of the things that I want you to do is always pay attention to your overwhelm and let me know. Like, let me know when you're drifting away, you're falling asleep, you're not no longer present, because then we take a break and
Yeah.
we ground.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true, because I think a lot of people, when they dig up the trauma or they start to clear the trauma, you get into this sense of, because I know with me in therapy, there's been a few times where I never had group therapy, but there's been a few times where I've had therapy with other family members, and
Mhm.
it it was kind of like, I almost do not want to talk about this in front of them, or I don't want to open up that area of almost like area of exposure or realness or whatever, because so many of us put on this front of like, yeah, I'm okay,
Yeah.
or I'm okay. And but I knew that, sometimes you have to. So I remember, because I was younger back then, that I remember like the therapist was like, this session's going to be very short, because we don't want to overwhelm everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when you do that, and especially with trauma that's very big or very traumatic, that it is good to do it in little sections.
Yeah.
So now that we kind of know what clearing the trauma, the steps of clearing the trauma, and how you kind of get into that area of clearing it, what benefits do people see from it when they start to manifest? Because it's like you go from somebody who was stuck and heavy because they had all this trauma, and now they're almost like getting it out. So how do you see people kind of do this transformation?
Yeah, I see, my clients say, like, I found my voice. I feel way less stuck. A huge part is like speaking their needs and actually setting boundaries and saying what they want and saying yes or no authentically, which is huge. I see people connecting more to their partners or disconnecting when it's right, switching careers, like simple things like taking naps because they never did in the past because they were too anxious all the time, and just really getting more excited, getting more
Mm.
excited about being alive and what's possible. Because when you constantly feel stuck and drained and overwhelmed, and that everything you're doing doesn't lead to anything, it mutes you and it makes you apathetic. And
Mm-hmm.
so I see my clients just getting so excited to be alive again and to experience life and to be okay with being sad and still be like, I'm alive and I'm here and it's okay. Even if I feel these different sensations, like they're all okay, they're all welcome. I can survive all of them and I can create like the life that I want. And it's just really exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting it is because when I was first, I guess you could say, I don't even really know how to put it, but I guess you could say when I was first clearing trauma, because trauma never goes away. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
trauma's always there. It's always going to be with you. It's a part of you. It's something that happened or something you took in or um witnessed or whatever. There's so many types of trauma that happens, and I think people always hear trauma, and there's big trauma, there's little trauma, but there's trauma no matter what it is. It affects everybody differently, and it really affects people. Like, something as simple as, being a young kid, and your quote unquote best friend at the time says, I don't like your dress, it's ugly. And then, she doesn't want to be your friend anymore. You're like 6 on the playground, but
Yeah.
all that stuff really, sometimes how we take it in at the moment, it really sometimes sits with us. And then of course there's the trauma that really, almost like life-changing trauma that definitely takes a lot of work to work through.
Yeah. But you hit on exactly the right point, which is it's not about the thing that happened. It's about what's happening inside of us and how we are responding to it internally.
Yes.
That's the main point.
Yes, and I'm going to tell you guys something, which when I was in in nursing school, and one of my jobs while I was in nursing school was I was a yard duty teacher for my daughter's school. So I worked with, on the yard with all these kids. And I'm telling you, the little girl would come up to me, be like, so and so says I'm ugly, or so and so
Mm,
says she's going to steal my doll. Like, or this girl's making funny faces and I really think that as young girls and as child women when they're children, we take a lot of stuff internally in,
yeah.
and we take a lot, because you would see the little boys running around, fighting with each other, like wrestling on the ground, and they would get up and be best friends. Like, but
Yeah, totally. And they get out their energy, right? They're like
yes.
fighting, they're doing, but girls internalize. It's very true.
They internalize so much. So I think for women, it's very important that we try not to internalize all these traumas that are within just almost like daily things, because there's a lot of daily traumas that might make us feel a certain way, and the internalizing it, especially, as a young girl, it happens quite frequently, because I know with boys I would see them beat each other up, and next thing you know, they're like, hey, let's go hang out some more. Like, but girls really take it internally, and it's sad because we grow up as women who have these little internal traumas that at the time, they felt really big, but we're structuring ourselves to block our manifestation abilities because of something that happened to us that at the time, you know, was just something that happened.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's hard. What 3 tips would you give for somebody who is trying to clear their traumas to start to get on the path of success of manifestation?
One is to connect to your body every day, even starting with like 30 seconds, just sitting with your body and noticing the sensations in your body, like what's happening in your chest, in your belly, in your throat. Just notice it and don't try to fix it or judge it or change it, just noticing. Second is a lot of self-compassion. And, really do the self-compassion work every day, because if we're not compassionate, that actually really blocks our healing. And three is just taking little actions, like not overwhelming, but just like small little things, that people can do that feel manageable to keep the progress going as you work on your healing at the same time.
Oh, that's great. That is awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And is there anything you would like to close out with and share with the audience?
Thank you for having me. I can't even believe that you have space for a podcast while also having space for sick people. Like it blows my mind.
Definitely. I would say sometimes it blows my mind too, but I am good at setting boundaries on certain things and creating. I actually was just talking about this on my Instagram, creating flexibility for myself where I am able to do the podcast and work and then do all the other stuff that I enjoy doing. And really, the thing that I enjoy about the podcast is because it gives me something else to talk about, and it gives me something else to enjoy besides just healing, because I think a lot of healers and a lot of coaches and a lot of people who are in that area, we do suffer from burnout.
Yeah.
And that's why I didn't necessarily want my podcast to be so nurse focused. I love the profession of nursing. I think nurses are definitely the healers of the medical industry. They are the healers, while
Mhm.
the physicians, I see them as almost like the creators. They have this pathway of how to help people, but it's, in all honesty, the nurse who really heals the patient, not just physically, but mentally as well, and takes in a lot of that energy where the physician may not. So, I wanted to do a podcast that touched on my spiritual beliefs and then also touched on the healing aspect behind it. So I'm very happy that you came on the show.
That's awesome. Me too. And my message for everyone will be that I really believe in your healing. And even when it feels really, really, really frustrating, just know that actually there's so much beauty in the traumas and there's so much wisdom that you can learn and grow from. And I just believe that it's possible for every single human being. It's innate, it's part of us, it's who we are, is our capacity to be resilient. So I'm just excited for everybody's journeys.
Yes, thank you so much for coming. And how can people find you and reach out to you if they need to get a hold of you and learn more about the somatic based practices of clearing their trauma?
Best places on Instagram. So I'm at marina.y.t.
Nice. Thank you. Awesome. And I will put all the links in the show notes as always. And I just want to thank everybody for listening to Chakras and Cuss Words. Please comment, like, and subscribe. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.